And welcome back to the lunchroom. We do hope that you are sticking with us here. And for the next 15 or so minutes, we will be speaking with Mr. Wayne Girard. He is an individual not everybody may know, but certainly he'll be able to tell us a little bit about himself in just a bit. He is the St. Lucia Labour Party candidate for ancillary canneries. Mr. Wayne Girard, welcome to the lunchroom. Finally, we have you here. We're glad that you are having a good day, no doubt, and you probably are a little bit tired as well, probably staying up as a political hopeful, observing the happenings over in the United States of America.
Yes. Good afternoon, Alex. Good afternoon to the lunchroom. Good afternoon, ancillary canneries. Yeah, I was up late last night, but not so much so the American elections. There were quite other matters for me to attend to. But yeah, it was on in the background whilst I did some of my sort of end of day reflection after spending the day in the constituency.
And of course, we're seeing what appears to be a much closer presidential race in the United States right now. With a lot of the polls seem to have been suggesting that it was going to be a bit of a walk in the park. There was no doubt about it in terms of Joe Biden sweeping across the country. There were so many states that were believed to be swing states that he would have come out and, you know, I think the poll of polls was looking at somewhere around 10%, a 10% margin. And certainly that thus far has been a disappointment, no doubt for Mr. Biden, and a blessing for Donald Trump, because I think in the popular vote right now, only about 2 million people, you know, out of 64 million is the split. A very small margin, really, not that 10% that he was expecting. Anything that you are taking home as a hopeful representative of the people of ancillary to this matter?
Yeah, you fight until the last ballot is, because I mean, if you were to, as you say, regard some of what the polls were saying, the lesson there is to never stop fighting and keep your eye on the prize, because it's never won until it's actually won. So that would be my lesson from it. Cognizant of the polls, what they say, but the fact of the matter is it is won on the day of the election. In the case of the Americans, some of the ballots are counted first, and the mail-in ballots are coming after. So we don't know what that will prove to demonstrate. But simply to work until the end is what's very important. So keep working until you get to that finishing line.
Are you also concerned that I mean, amidst all of the rhetoric out there, all of the concerns that were being brought forward regarding the leadership of President Trump, especially in terms of COVID-19, the issues in terms of race in America right about now, a great level of apprehension being expressed, and even within that scenario, I glanced at something that even suggested that President Trump may have actually increased the number of votes that he got amongst African Americans, and I was very, very surprised, and Hispanics as well.
It's quite interesting what we see emerging out of the American elections. It's very interesting. It is certainly clear that what he promised before the last election, much of what he promised, he went ahead and did most of it quite early, to the dismay of other people. But the point is, he delivered on what he said he was going to do in that regard. With regards to the African American and Hispanics, that's a very interesting development. But I look forward to seeing in detail what really has transpired, to be honest, because it's just pretty strange. I mean, a lot of people were predicting something different than what we're seeing now. So let's see what in the fullness of time, when we get a good sense as to what actually transpired. Take some lessons from it.
A little closer to home, of course, ancillary canneries.
Yep.
Are you one of those parachute candidates? Are you
No.
coming from outside the constituency?
No,
or are you
no,
actually
no.
born and bred?
I'm actually from Jacmel, the community of Jacmel. So I was born and raised in Jacmel. I mean, I served as an acolyte at the Jacmel Catholic Church. Spent most of my formative years there. Even when I went overseas to study, I always stayed in touch with the community and helped in various regards. So I'm definitely not one of those parachute candidates coming in from outside. I'm a man of the soil, son of the soil, fortified by ancillary canneries.
Why the decision to pursue a political career?
It's always interesting. Yeah, I've always wanted to pursue politics, to be quite honest. The there are things that need to be done in a country, and the debate is whether you do it better inside of government or outside of government. In this particular instance, in Ansari Canaries particular, I thought to be able to deliver on what I think is necessary for the people of Ansari Canaries, I had to be that change that I'm so desirous of. So I decided to throw my hat in the ring and make the very huge sacrifice. Without any prompting, I may add, it was something that I wanted to do. So here we are, working towards achieving that result on election night.
Well, and of course you have no idea when that is going to be.
Yes.
But
yes.
Clearly, in terms of what your message is, what is your singular message to the people of Ancillary Canaries as to why they should in fact be supporting Wayne Girard?
I think there are several. I think we would begin to start with having grown up in the community, from the community. I understand and recognize the aspiration and the fears of the people of the community. This is not an activity which I decided to do overnight. This is something that I spent quite a bit of time thinking about and preparing for. I believe in consultation, which is something that we see is quite lacking at this particular point in time. The way the government moves ahead and does things, and after the fact, then have meetings to decide if I did the right thing. So I believe in consultation, and I believe that I have demonstrated over the years. The trouble is, I've never been a great fan of being on television saying that I've done this for X school or that school or these individuals. I think it's a very private thing. If you're contributing meaningfully to the community, there's no need to advertise it on social media or television. So I've always been connected to my community and doing quite a bit for them.
But of course, that's a very difficult stance to take, though, especially.
I mean, now it's a different. I mean, so now that I'm an endorsed candidate, I think more is expected in terms of demonstrating publicly what I've been doing. So I understand that balance, but I'm talking about in terms of the reasons why I got into it. It was very personal, and no prompting from anyone or any promises.
Ancillary Canaries, a lot of people don't really understand the constituency very well. They tend to think, okay, well, it's a village somewhere down there on the west coast. It's a very diverse space, though, because you effectively have about 3 distinct areas. The Roseau Valley area part of it. You've got Ancillary,
and then you have Canaries.
And then you have Canaries. And of course, I would suppose the Roseau Valley, primarily agriculture, whereas Ancillary Canaries, a bit of agriculture, but mostly fishing?
Fishing, and there's quite a bit of agro-processing. So, your Plus Cassave, and then previously we had cannibal soaps in Canaries. So there's quite a bit of talent with regards to the small agro-processing businesses. And as you rightfully mentioned, the belt from Roseau going up to Millet has been largely agricultural. Whether or not we could do more with what we're producing currently is a bigger question. I suppose we could always discuss that later. But you're correct. There are individual peculiarities to each constituency, to each part of the constituency. So fishing would play a significant role in Ancillary Canaries, and whereas agriculture will play a more significant role in the sort of Roseau to Millet belt.
Let's talk about fishing a little bit, because obviously that has been very, very topical since Friday. And of course you have 2 communities which are very, very, for them fishing is very, very important for their livelihoods, Ancillary and Canaries. What has the response been thus far regarding some of the decisions being made on their behalf, especially in terms of that recent decision to close fish operations in St. Lucia?
It was unbelievable. I mean, not many people, when they read it the first time, believe it was done in the way it was done. I mean, it is the only decent thing. If you are about to decide to prevent someone from earning a living, you make some consideration into how you're going to compensate them for that time off, so to speak. It's a very difficult thing for a community like Ancillary Canaries for the fishermen not to go out to sea, given that a lot of them have already expended some sort of cost in preparing to go to sea. It has been a very difficult few days for them. It took a lot to try to get them to understand that, I suppose, this government is only going to be in office for not much longer. And it goes back, Alex, to the pattern of this government in terms of how they go about doing things that matter to the people of St. Lucia. It is only fair that they ask the views of the people who are going to be affected before they go about making a decision. We could go back to the situation where there was the lockdown of the country during the beginnings of the COVID, and the decision to to close the public washroom facilities at particular times. Again, it points to the lack of understanding of the current member of parliament and the government in terms of what they're doing when they do some things like that. But it shouldn't be surprising. We still don't have a deputy speaker of the House. So, I mean, the pattern is clear for us to realize that this government has its own agenda, has no respect for the norms and values of institutions that have sort of existed for years, and will do as they please when they please, and find a convenient reason to say sorry when they actually, well, not even sorry, find a reason to backtrack when they've discovered that they've done something wrong. You're talking about the fishing, but what about the tourism levy bill, which was also pulled back? So it's just a pattern of the government doing one thing and then asking you what your views are after they've done it.
But of course, the argument of the government is that action had to be taken to protect the health and safety of the populace. And so that's why they effectively closed the fisheries sector for a period of a week. You buy into that? Do you think that that's not reasonable?
Perhaps, but what has changed? What would have changed that a conversation with somebody who walked up to the Prime Minister's office and saw him and asked for an audience? What would have changed within those 2 days of those meetings which could not have been discussed before the decision was taken? I'm not convinced that anything substantial has changed in terms of how they could have gone about doing it. So, yeah, I mean, the point is clear. If you could find a solution now, we should have had the discussion before and then implement whatever you wanted to implement. So I don't buy the argument that that was the only way to protect the lives of St. Lucia. Calix, the fact of the matter is, a lot of the concerns with COVID, I believe, are coming through the front door, not the back door. I mean, it's clear if you look at the analysis of the information and the projections in terms of when entry from back doors detected compared to what's happening through the front door. It is clear. The danger, and we can't say 100%, but the danger doesn't appear to be emanating from the back door. Yeah.
But what is, in terms of how do you deal with that? Of course, people are wanting to get some clear idea of solutions and way forward, especially with respect to that matter, because clearly whether it's the front door, the back door, it is a problem, but at the same time, we are now nearly at 100 cases, 13 yesterday, and individuals are obviously looking at this. We've never seen these types of numbers before, as one can well imagine, certainly not in terms of active cases. And, you know, people are wondering, you know,
so very serious.
What's going to happen. I mean, ancillary canneries, I know this has not gone on the blip yet in terms of places with any cases, but, you know.
Fingers crossed. But, yeah, it's a very serious, Calix, it's a very serious issue. This issue of COVID confronting the country is a very serious issue. And, of course, government has to do what it has to do to protect the interests of the citizens. There's no debate or question about that. Where the question comes in is, why not have the discussion, whatever it is. I've heard some suggestions last night and this morning with regards to what government could possibly implement to control how the fishermen go out to sea, in terms of whether it's the amount of fuel that they have on board, the type of equipment, where they go. So it's not difficult to conceive a solution to that problem. The trouble is when you do it without asking the people who are actually involved in the process for their advice. So I agree, there is a concern, a legitimate concern, but with the right conversation, I think we could deal with the concerns. I mean, you brought up a very interesting point about the testing, 7 days before you actually get to the country. Anything could happen in a week, Alex. But just still the government is relying on it. So whether or not they're actually as serious as they sometimes pretend to be about COVID is something that I suppose St. Lucians could judge for themselves.
Now, of course, especially moving forward, I mean, this is a very important issue for tourism and the ability for tourism to get back up and running. Now, your opponent is, in fact, the sitting Minister for Tourism.
Correct.
We've heard quite a bit, even before we get into the issue of tourism, though, we've heard quite a bit being said and touted by the United Workers' Party that for quite some time, ancillary canneries has not been given a minister by the St. Lucia Labour Party. And in fact, in the last campaign, we heard again the suggestion that ancillary canneries was getting two ministers.
Correct.
Because one of their hopefuls, Senator Herman Gill Francis, is in fact the current Minister for Home Affairs. And so effectively, the suggestion was that you were going to be getting double the representation in cabinet, so to speak, I suppose. What is there going to be any sort of guarantee that if in fact Wayne Girard is elected, that he's in fact going to be serving in the cabinet and Ancillary is going to be getting a minister?
There isn't a guarantee, but the political leader did make a statement to the people of Ancillary with regards to what his intention was. The question is, Carrick, you mentioned that they were getting 2 ministers. Now just imagine, with 2 ministers in cabinet, were they not able to convince the Prime Minister that shutting down the public washroom facility at the time suggested was inappropriate? Were they not able to suggest to the Prime Minister the closure of the fishing industry with no notice was not appropriate? So then what is the point of having 2 ministers if nothing really could be done really in the interest of ancillary canneries? I'm not going to second guess what happened previous Labour governments, why they didn't choose a minister. That's neither here nor there. The point is, there's a new leader who's made the point that it is his intention to do so. So I'll take his word for it. I'll take his word for it.
Now, of course, in the case of ancillary canneries, so many different issues. We're seeing tourism being pushed there quite a bit.
Yep.
And quite recently, the announcement of village tourism,
Correct.
and I think there's supposed to be some initiative
Correct.
down at the waterfront of the village of Ancillary. Good benefits, you think, for the community?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna go against anything that is for the development of the community. What I would question is the timing of what they do. Given the situation of COVID, I suppose the instability with regards to tourism, what's going to happen in the future, I would have spent the 1.86 million relocating people in flood-prone areas. If was my decision. It still deals with the issue of unemployment, but it deals with the priority of the people at the time. The issue with the tourism, there's nothing wrong with it, but I noticed that the number seems to be reducing. 2 years ago in Puerto Rico, I think the Minister of Tourism said that they signed an agreement for $3 million for the Ancillary Canneries Village Tourism Initiative. 3 weeks ago, we see 1.86. So the question is, what's happening?
These are US dollars?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So it's 1.86 US.
In fact, from what I recall, way back in 2017, when the Prime Minister was giving a
budget address.
Well, not even a budget address. I think it was on a New York radio station.
Correct.
He actually mentioned $40 million for village tourism.
So the figure changes depending on which publication you read. I cite the more recent one in terms of 2018 because it was the more recent indication of a specific sum for ancillary canneries. It was 3 million. So I'm not sure why 1.86. Nothing wrong with the initiative, but I think it is important to fix the basics. And the basics, sanitation, access to the village, where people are going to be able to congregate safely with their friends and family and visitors. There's quite a bit that has to happen before we go into that initiative. The Prime Minister has been speaking about this from 2007 when he was the Minister of Tourism. So surely he's had enough time to think of something sensible and conceptual. What we see now at the moment, although we're not against it, I think the priorities could be different. At this particular point in time, the priorities should be different.
What do people on the ground, you would say, right about now in ancillary canneries, jackmill, millet, what are they really looking for, in your opinion?
Food to eat, laptops for the kids, the ability to have probably 2 square meals a day. Those are the real issues that came up because the morning of the launch I was actually in the village, just having some conversation to see what the reaction was. And the majority of people, not so much so against it, but the priority again. The priority is just, for them, is not the right time. There are other more pressing issues the government could attend to before they go on and decide to launch this new, well, not so much so new, but this sort of rebranded village tourism initiative.
Of course, you just mentioned about food to eat and this whole issue of food security, so very important at this time. Jackmill, millet, roseau, these areas traditionally banana producing areas, the bedrock of the economy for very many decades. Where are we at right now in terms of that part of the constituency?
I suppose the banana farmers are suffering the same plight like the other banana farmers in the country. Reduced access to market and just a sort of general, lackadaisical attitude towards them at this particular point in time. I have not heard a word from the Minister of Agriculture in all of what's happening. We have not heard a word from the Minister of Agriculture in terms of what the plan is for the future. There is a consequence with COVID and the numbers of tourists coming to the country. There is a consequence. What is the government thinking about tourism, agriculture, health, education going forward? I'm still yet to understand what it is that they're thinking. It appears to be business as usual for the government in terms of the way they've opened up the economy, have tourists coming in. It appears to be business as usual, and that's a very scary prospect, to be quite honest.
Where do you think focus should be at this point in time, in this current economic situation that we find ourselves in?
Allowing people to very easily and safely be able to feed themselves on a daily basis. In the event that schools are open, be able to provide their kids with the necessary instruments, uniforms, school books, laptops to be able to attend school. And in the event of some losing their job, I would think it would be a very good time to retrain them in the various other types of economy. We say orange, we say blue, we say green. But the point is to retrain them for the economy and the future that's about to be upon them. So that's what I think the priority should be, feeding people and making sure that they could look after themselves first and foremost, because there are some very challenging situations in ancillary canneries. It's very difficult, very, very, very difficult.
But of course, it's going to take resources if you're going to be talking about retraining, and of course, even at that time, people need to still be able to survive.
It's priority. I mean, the priority. We would not have, for example, borrowed the sums of money that the government is borrowing for the Girard International Airport. A Labour government would have had a different priority. Not just a different priority, a different methodology of doing it. We would have explored the PPP avenue. It would have been just a different. I mean, ancillary canneries has within it at the moment significant resources, assets that could be used for the benefit of the community. But at the moment, that is not the case. And it's just simply to look at what happened in Soufriere with regards to the Soufriere Regional Development Foundation. What is the reason for it being set up, and what has it achieved since 2001, I believe it was established. So we need to do something similar for ancillary canneries. We need to be more serious about our marine management unit in ancillary canneries, access to the waterfalls, whether or not we have a conversation with those who are mining resources from the community. I know there's a fee being paid to the government, but for the damage being done to the water table, the health, electronics of people's homes, I think there should be a conversation with those heavy truckers going through the community on a regular basis. So there are ideas that we could come up with to assist the central government and the community in sort of dealing with some of the issues that they face on a day-to-day basis. It's how do we leverage the existing assets of ancillary canneries.
You mentioned access very early on. That issue of access seems to be a big problem for persons, especially in canneries, even more so than ancillary. And of course, that access impacts on their ability to get to jobs and access economic activity.
Even night school, even going, if they wanted to go to Safa to pursue some sort of education in the evening, they can't get bus to return home in the evening.
But how do you address that? What's the thinking there?
I think the thinking there is really, because we've had some conversations, and some of the bus drivers are saying the issue of safety after 6 in terms of dealing with cash. And I'm saying to them, we can find a mechanism. I have a few in mind, but we can find a mechanism as how we could deal with the issue of how do they get paid after the sun goes down. It doesn't necessarily have to be
cash. Is that the main issue, though, keeping back?
A lot of them were concerned about the safety of them plying the route on an evening. A lot of them had that issue. So when I said to them, if we take away the cash, is that a concern? And they were like, okay. Because if there's no cash, the likelihood of somebody attempting to rob you disappears. So that was a very, very significant reason that came up, actually, their personal safety after the sun goes down. So what do we use? I mean, we have smartphones. When you travel to the UK, you get an Oyster card and you tap on the bus. So something could be utilized to take away the need for cash after a certain period. You're granted a route-bound license to ply a particular route. If the citizens of the country are not being provided with what is required for them to live a very productive life, the government needs to step in and see what could be done to deal with that matter. So I can't give you all of these suggestions now, but one of the main issues that came up in my discussion with them was the security, their personal security.
Mr. Wayne Girard, we're going to have to take a break at this point in time because we're going to have to take in our weather news at this time. Of course, Marine's going to guide us through that. When we come back, we'll also continue the conversation and maybe even open the lines to take in a few calls as well.
Thank you very much.
And welcome back to the lunchroom. And of course, we are speaking with the St. Lucia Labour Party's hopeful for ancillary canneries. He is Mr. Wayne Girard. But before we get to you, Wayne, just a quick update for our listeners out there that the Department of Health and Wellness has in fact issued a new statement coming out regarding cases 98 to 105. So 8 new cases coming in, being reported by the Department of Health and Wellness. COVID-19 confirmed positive cases, and they are spread across an age range from 4 years old up to 55 years old. And we are looking at, well, somebody from the district of Soufrière for the first time here. Case number 99 is a 36-year-old female from Soufrière. If you just go before that, 98 is a 33-year-old from the Miku district. Case 100 is a 45-year-old male from Babonneau. 101 is a 4-year-old female from Vieux-Fort. 102 is a 4-year-old female from Vieux-Fort again. So maybe twins, I'm not sure. Case number 103 is a 54-year-old female from the Labrie district. Case 104 is a 55-year-old female from the Labrie district again. And case 105 is a 50-year-old male from the Grosley district. So 6 females and 2 males within that list, so continuing to suggest a skewing of numbers in terms of females. And of course, as we indicated, that could very well mean that we are seeing a bit of underreporting amongst males, but no surprise there, perhaps for some persons who may know their spouses and husbands. So we, of course, are noting this situation with concern, that it continues to see the numbers going up. We are over the 100 mark with 76 active cases. Yesterday we had 4 recoveries, but of course between yesterday and today we're seeing 21 new cases thus far. 21 new cases thus far within a period of 2 days, so it's averaging over 10 a day. Is certainly a little bit of a concern, and we'll have to see how things continue to pan out. And of course, do spare a thought for all those hardworking people over at the Ezra Long Laboratory in particular. They are going non-stop, I understand, and so best wishes to Dr. Felicia and his team over there, and we do hope that they are staying safe. And of course, as well, we noted in the case of the Owen King EU Hospital, I think there was another case recorded over there which has caused the hospital is effectively, from what I was told, and of course, I mean, we haven't actually seen a statement, but from an inside source suggesting that it's almost a bit of a skeleton staff, essential individuals working there right about now. So, of course, that is no good, because this is the big issue when you're dealing with COVID-19. Some people think that it's just about it's just about people falling sick and, the potential for deaths. Deaths have economic impacts. They have work impacts. People are losing time and productive hours. So it means that your entire economy is suffering as a result of a lot of people being sick at one time. So there is, in fact, a major impact, and we're seeing how, we've seen, well, thus far the approach is 1 case. I think we saw 1 case down in the electoral department in Vieux-Fort, and the entire department is closed as a result of that. So you can see how that is impacting on a number of institutions, as people have to take the necessary steps to protect and to contain spread. So we've got to look at that certainly in a very big context within that regard. Now, of course, Mr. Girard, you are looking at this situation. It's a very interesting time to be getting into politics, no doubt, because the pressures of any government, whenever that election is called and whenever we see a result, it's going to be a lot of pressure and a lot of things to solve.
I mean, the whole point of politics is to find that balance between competing interests and competing needs. So it is always an interesting time to be in government. This is a very uniquely difficult period, but it gives us an opportunity to do things differently, to reset, to think, to reflect on what we want to aspire to as a country, where we want to be, what we want to do. Do we want to rely so heavily on tourism, or at least the type of tourism or the type of tourism model that we currently exist with or run? So it's a very interesting time indeed, but a time also for us to reconsider quite a bit of how we're doing, what we've been doing, how we've been doing thus far.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, you mentioned just earlier on the whole issue of the blue economy. We were speaking about fisheries, of course. Today, in fact, and yesterday, there was an ongoing consultation through the OECS. They're leading the way in terms of a blue economy and defining that, in terms of defining that economic space as well. Very, very important, no doubt, for communities like ancillary canneries.
We should police it a lot more seriously than we do. I mean, St. Lucia is 238 square miles, but as you know, Calix, our economic territorial waters goes far beyond that. And I think there's a lot of value there, and we need to pay a little particular attention to it because there's great value there. So we need to spend a lot of time thinking of how we're going to do the blue or the orange economy to see what opportunities we could unleash or unfold for our citizens to be. Yeah.
The potential for that orange economy, you've spoken about it a few times as well, the creative industries. Ancillary canneries may not necessarily be the place that people think of. Quite often it's on the other coast, Dennery, with Dennery segment.
But we do have significant talent. Significant talent in ancillary canneries. Significant. We have Youth on Fire, we have Ransom Studios, which have done quite a bit of work for quite a bit of famous artists. I got an endorsement.
Nathan Viterbo?
Yeah, and his crew. So so there's a lot of talent, artistic talent within ancillary canneries, and I suppose people wonder why the youth gravitate towards music and arts is because they can't express their pain, their anguish in a particular way, so they gravitate towards the arts and the music to do that. So we need to create more of that. I mean, there's a request from canneries now to have their own studio. I mean, Ancillary has one, but canneries doesn't have one, and the young people in canneries are saying they would like to have, in the future, perhaps the opportunity to have their own, to get into the studio and be creative, because they're very talented in ancillary canneries. Absolutely.
We've heard from the Labour Party, certainly from the political leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party, statements about the youth economy, as he termed it. We've also heard statements about smart cities, and I'm assuming that that's a direction in terms of smart utilization, digital economy. Ancillary canneries, can that constituency benefit from that kind of direction? How would it be able to benefit?
Anything that recognizes innovation, ancillary canneries will be able to benefit from it because we are very talented people. So converting the ideas to money is something that ancillary canneries can benefit from. So when you say the youth economy and what the Labour Party is aspiring to do with regards to essentially allowing people to allow their ideas to generate revenue, it's not a very complicated thing because there are business processes that exist at the moment that are no longer fit for purpose in light of COVID. So when we say innovation, you could take it from a simple view of doing what we do at the moment better. Who best to do that than the young creative people who spend a lot of time in technology, have the energy, the drive? Who better to lead that charge than them? They're not just consumers. I think we need to begin to see them as also contributors. And to contribute, we need to find something meaningful for them to do, to engage in. And the youth economy is just one such avenue or umbrella for them to be able to do that.
Of course, we're going to have to continue that point because I think some people were still looking for a little bit more definition as to exactly what that means, if it's more than just a tagline. But let's also indicate to our listeners that you can also call in if you've got any question for Mr. Wayne Girard. Of course, he is the St. Lucia Labour Party candidate for the constituency of ancillary canneries. Now, on the political side, no doubt, ancillary canneries seems to be a very important seat to win. I think that we're looking at the math over in the United States, and people are saying, well, you have to win Pennsylvania. It seems that ancillary canneries seems to be that one of those seats as well. But before we even actually get to that, our lines are blinking, so I think we're going to have to go to the phone lines to take in a few calls. Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
Okay, everything together.
Well, you got to choose something, caller.
Yeah, I mean, I'm corn, dumplings, everything in the pot, peas, everything that's in the kitchen.
Right ahead.
Okay, I was hoping that is was an SLP candidate speaking in that regard, in that sense there, because I was listening to the nail biter in America and I came in late. And as I was listening, I realized, well, that's exactly, it's like, it's very timely, But then I'm saying it only emphasizes the point that there is room for a third dimension in terms of how we look at the situation here. Because looking at it from the SLP point of view, and while you're giving advice, they say, well, you don't give your secret out, but I don't believe in that. It is important to note, like, in reality, what is going on. There is another complete way of looking at all the other things without the extra burden of being in a political party where you have other people. It's not a place where we're voting for a president, but it's almost like somebody's idea which the rest would follow. Now, it's not necessarily every individual coming in with their own kind of play, like it's a template. You understand? That is why it would, that characterizes the SLP and UWP. Each person, and then you find the leaders start ruling autocratically, like they were President Minister, for instance.
Caller, I think I'm trying to understand what you're saying, and from what I'm gathering, you're saying that there's a need for more independence in politics.
And I'm not saying more because it would be just like SLP, but and independence. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, and independence in politics, right?
With SLP and with Philip J.P. Chastney.
But I'm just thinking, caller. I'm just thinking in terms of and I'm not no issue with that. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just looking at the worldwide experience, right? In terms of the world where it is right now. Where exactly would you say that even finds great majority? I mean, it appears that all across the world in all political systems where you have democratic choice, you've got a party system. You've got parties in place.
Some places you have numerous parties. Some parties.
Well, you do have some places with numerous parties, but they tend to be in very I would say demographically divided or ethnically divided countries, or even in let's say in the case of the United Kingdom, where you have a lot of different regions, geographically divided countries. So you have a party which is strong in Scotland, you have parties that are strong in Northern Ireland, parties strong in Wales, but overall you still have two large primary political entities.
Well, let me deal with that point and let me finish, and I'll finish what I have to say afterwards.
Very quickly, please, caller.
Yeah, true. That's why I'm going that route. Yeah, it means, I'm not saying like other places, because it's a unique opportunity, and we shouldn't be surprised that we have the resources in terms of, we have so much resources, more than we need, but also we have somebody who can actually work his way through and create that opportunity, which is very important. Now, let me give you a few points. I would take all these people from Martinique, bring the government, bring them to St. Lucia, those who want to come down here, right? Because some people just autocratically, they just figure, well, they have an idea, well, we should, like the way they're looking at it, it's like people are not free to travel from island to island, right? And that will never stop, but just be humane and go there, take the people, bring them in. That's the mode the government should be taking care.
Thanks very much for your suggestion, caller. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get into that too much at this point in time. Let's try to take in another call at this time. Good afternoon. Welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
Good afternoon. I'm just calling to find out why and I've just listened to the caller previous, and almost to say that the default question is, or the default state is, that we do not find other alternative systems around the world. Just in regard to what he was pushing in terms of the independence there, and as I've said before, there are other places where such systems are practiced, and it is democratic in all its processes.
But we have a system where we can have independence, caller. There's nothing stopping independence from running in our system. But what you find happening is that at the end of the day, independence still coagulates. They still coalesce towards one party or the other. That's been our history of independence here in our political system.
That definitely is the status quo. And I'm saying that there is no reason for us not to be able to redefine what is. And just to allude to a few things you came back with when the caller pointed out his issue, there are places such as territories in Canada where what is called consensus government, as it is known, is practiced. Also, Guernsey Island in the Channel Islands, they also practice that. So there are other places where we have the examples to follow. So it's not like we'll be reinventing the wheel.
Very well then, caller. Thanks for that point.
All right.
For that point. Let's take in one other call very quickly. Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
I like something they call chicken wings, but not with the big shoulder, just the bottom one.
You're very specific, man. I think that's very interesting, caller. Thanks very much. Go right ahead.
Yeah, what I will like to ask Mr. Girard, that village tourism, I keep hearing that for a good while. I think that coming from the Labour and it adopt from the UW.
It used to be called heritage tourism. Yeah.
Yeah, but what I would like to know is, are they going to put proper facilities in those villages before the tourists start coming in? Like, say, if you're taking part in the village tourism, the government or somebody pass, they give you a bathtub, a shower, a flushing toilet, or they will still leave what we call puivit or latrine, and those people come in there, because those things you can smell it.
You have a major wastewater problem. You're very, very correct, caller. Very, very correct in all of these villages.
That's before people start coming in. Because the same people that come in, they like that people, when they leave, they're going to talk about it.
Correct.
Okay? So I want to know what they're going to do before people start going as village tourism.
Thanks very much for that contribution, caller.
And
I think that's what you were saying.
That's what I'm saying.
And
even before,
right.
get the basics right before we move on to that, because you're very right, caller. You're very
Let's take
right.
another call very quickly. Good afternoon. Welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
Yeah, hello.
Good afternoon, caller. Go right ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, Alex. And to your guest, yes. I'm just calling to ask about whether it's possible that yourself or many of the investigative journalists that we have on island could look into, there's information coming out this morning from another radio station, local radio station, about that the Blue Ocean company, which has gotten the fisheries contract, that they owe a pretty large amount of money to local officials. And I find that to be, well, I believe that, first of all, that the local journalists should really jump onto that case and to let St. Lucians know exactly how much money which is being owed to our officials, because I believe it's not because that I'm not a fisherman that I should not be concerned about my fellow St. Lucian who is a fisherman.
Now, you realize the issue that we have now, caller, with that. Before, that would be considered perhaps public information, because we're dealing with a public corporation. What we have now, I do not really know what the terms are, whether you can just simply go up to the entity and say, well, can you tell us how much you owe fish, or how much you owe fishers right at this point in time? So all those things, especially when you're looking at what people call PPPs, public-private partnerships, there has to be a clear rule of engagement as to what is expected. The transparency aspects have to be built into whatever agreement you have. I'm not sure that we can even get that information from the entity. We have to go to maybe the government to try to force it from them.
Yeah, because I believe that the government does have regulations in place for all sectors of the economy, and this should be no exception that St. Lucians want to know, because the problem is that this is a major problem that the local fishers have had for eons, and the government promised that this new private entity would change things and would pay the fishers, and now we are being told that the guys are still suffering. So, I mean, we need answers. The government has to give the public answers about these things. I mean, it's practically unacceptable that, we cannot have our local solution fishers being taken advantage of after having had such a long period of having their money being owed, and now a new entity coming in and is like same old khaki pants.
Well, I'm not even sure, Caller, if the fishers have the confidence at this point that the government is on their side in terms of backing them up, because even in the whole privatization process, there were many different models that could have been used, which would have perhaps involved the cooperatives themselves in managing the facility, and it was not done.
Yes, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, I think most St. Lucians would have been outraged that at least the first offer should have been made to the fisher cooperatives to have taken over that entity, as opposed to just handing it over to foreigners, whoever they may be. And now we have in our fishers in the same old fit. So I mean, this thing is very concerning. I know a lot of St. Lucians are beginning to get real fed up with this thing. That I'm hoping that perhaps
we'll have to see what we can do, Caller, to look into it.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
all
right. Let us know let the public know what's going on. Because.
Thanks very much. Let's try to take in one more call before we end. Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
Mr. George.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon to your guest.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Mr. Girard.
Hi.
In the height of COVID-19, and St. Lucia has been depending highly on tourism. Mm-hmm. We know that the flights are not coming. We see what's going on. Mm-hmm. If you were in government today, mm-hmm. at least tell me, if you're going to give me 5, give me 2 things which you'd advise your Prime Minister as to where to take this country now and what the plan is going forward outside of tourism.
Sure.
And I'll listen to you on the radio.
Sure.
Thanks very much, Caller.
I'll give you 2 very quick ones. One is I would be suggesting to my Prime Minister that we move away from the model of the sort of high volume, low value tourists, and that we move into a situation where we attract more of the high value and the low volume tourists. So, for example, on any given day, you would recognize the loss in productivity that happens when the cruise ships come into St. Lucia. When that happens, it has a significant cost to the people of St. Lucia, but we don't measure it in that regard. We only see it for the immediate benefit to the tourists, the taxi drivers and the small vendors, but we don't actually see the consequence on the bigger country, on the bigger economy. So that is something I would certainly consider in terms of where do we position our tourism.
And we've been spending quite a lot on cruise tourism, and the question is whether we're really getting the kind of value added.
Because when you look at the reports, the further north they go, the spend per passenger increases.
Right.
So, for example, in St. Lucia, it's probably about 10 US, just an average. But when they go further north, it's 90 US.
Yes,
so the question is,
in the Virgin Islands, in St. Martin, they're spending a lot more money.
Correct.
But those islands tend to be a lot more geared towards duty-free offerings as well, and it seems they're doing a much better job. St. Kitts, for instance, as well.
But they have a different agenda. But in terms of what's specifically beneficial to St. Lucia, that's one suggestion I would make with regards to that.
I mean, an interesting point. I mean, the caller who called in first, I mean, he was a little bit all over the place, but he was raising an issue that might be of interest, especially in terms of tourism, and that whole issue of Martinique as being really a much bigger market than we really are playing it, using it for.
Correct. We have... there's a draft agreement at the moment, and the person who negotiated it will be able to verify that in terms of a twinning between Anserie and Martinique. So we've had discussions to see how, going into the future, how we make those communities closer and work together. So he made the point about 2 things that we would do with regards to if I was advising the Prime Minister.
Right,
and
the
I
second
said to change the way we do tourism. The other thing is to identify where, as a country and as a region, we have this competitive advantage. And I believe with this new 4th industrial revolution, which ties back to the youth economy, is where St. Lucia could make a significant impact, because it does not require...
Break it down very quickly for listeners.
So the 4th industrial is essentially the blurring of the lines between technology and human interaction. So at the moment, as of now, before you would have to put your clothes in... I'll just give an example. You have to put your clothes into a washing machine, into a dryer and fold it yourself. Now there's a situation where your clothes come out of the dryer already folded, and you could do it from your phone. So there are quite a bit of things that that we as a country could develop because of the enthusiasm and the talent amongst our young people that gives us a benefit in the future. Now, I don't want to be very specific at this particular point in time. I know some people say we should be saying more, but we need to be very careful that what we're trying to do is not frustrated before we actually get into government. We could essentially be inheriting a poison chalice. So we need to be very careful about when we say what we say, because the government could, on the eve of them realizing that they're going to lose, make things difficult for us to implement once we get in. So those are the two things that I would definitely change the way we view who comes into the country, and in terms of what other industry St. Lucia could rely on. So there's a fourth pillar and a fifth pillar, not just tourism, manufacturing, agriculture.
Very, very interesting indeed. Of course, never enough time here at the lunchroom to get into
quick.
everything. It's very quick. It's a very quick lunch, and we're going to have to move on, of course.
Yeah.
But of course, we do welcome you to come and share with us.
Sure.
Maybe we can get into some of these other
More
issues.
specifics, yeah.
Maybe specifically look at maybe ancillary or canneries and some of these areas in particular.
And the benefit of the youth economy
and
to
focus
answer
on those, yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks very much for
Thank you
joining
very
us,
much.
and
Thank you
we
very
do
much.
hope that you have a wonderful day indeed. Mr. Wayne Girard, the candidate for the St. Lucia Labour Party for the constituency of ancillary canneries. Now,